Before the Echo is brought to you by Exodus Outdoor Gear, ASIO Gear, and Stealth Outdoors. What's up, everyone?
Good evening.
Welcome back. Another episode of Awaken. I have a hard time remembering the name of this podcast for some reason.
Turkeys and Ancient Aliens, I think.
No, we call the series Awaken. Me and Patrick do, and I always forget that. I was like, "What the heck? Are we calling this again?" Anyway, everybody, thanks for getting on tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about turkeys before we get started on Genesis 6, because, I don't think Patrick's done any turkey hunting. Have you?
No. Can you still see me?
Yeah. What's up?
I was just doing something. I don't know what I'm doing on here. Hold on.
You look like you're confused, but I can still see.
No. I'm all right. I'm just going back. I was trying to get into the comments.
Oh, we'll keep going. But
all right, there I am, right there. Okay, there we go. I got it.
All right. Zeke got his first turkey. We got a lot of firsts this year, this week. My dad got his first. My dad?
No, I'm talking about Zeke.
Yeah, I think so,
He was
right?
balling like a pro on him, about a week ago?
It was a nice
Yeah,
turkey.
he hunted 2 years, and the first year I should have took a little more time to practice shooting with him because my crossbow was too big for him, and he always shot with his bow, so we went out there thinking we are going to use a crossbow, and then it was kind of big and bulky for him, and he had to have a bipod, and then all of a sudden we're like, okay, he's like, we've never grabbed a shotgun and practiced with it. It's just always been a bow all the time. So
yeah,
we kept on getting on turkeys and he'd miss. So that just got us better at turkey hunting all last season. So
how long?
And we bought a better crossbow for him, a smaller one. But here, one of the limbs started cracking, so I had to take that in to get it fixed. So we had to go back to gun. And it was at the second day that we had a gun is when he got his first turkey.
Cool.
What gun are you shooting?
It's one that I bought off a guy I worked with's girlfriend for $150 that I like, a little kind of off-brand 20 gauge semi-auto, and then I took the short stock from our Mossberg pump onto there because youth Mossberg little pump actions. They're like the size for a little kid, and they're just awful because they're as light as a pistol, and they have no spring for the recoil. It's just all like the smallest load just throws the kids back every time they shoot. So we just found a cheap semi-auto, something to throw 3-inch in and put a short stock on it.
Cool.
Yeah, Maddie's shooting that 870, but we got her some of that 2 3/4-inch TSS, and that doesn't kick very much at all. But I also I built up the stock with like padding. You can buy like pads and stuff for them and everything. So it's I don't know, it's a pretty nice little gun. But I've been kind of searching around the internet for 410s for Huck's first shotgun. I mean, he's not near ready yet, but it's going to come one of these years, you know.
Yeah.
But you'll be ready before you know it.
I know. Yeah, time's flying by.
That's a lot of kids' first gun. I think that was the first gun I ever shot was 410 and a 22.
Yep. He's already shot. He shot a 22.
When you took your hunter safety, did you have to shoot those guns like at the range? We had to do it here. I didn't know if y'all did it in your states.
Zeke's not even old enough for hunter safety yet. So
really,
yeah, I think it's 10, 11, or 12 or something for hunter safety.
Yeah.
And so Minnesota, you can't get a deer license until you're 10, and then it's the youth season. But then you can get turkey license. Like I don't even know what I think 5 years old and up.
Oh, cool.
So he's a second year turkey hunting, but he's got to go out of state to do deer hunting.
Oh, that's weird. That's crazy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can hunt.
Yeah, I don't
like too. There's like kids with that they're velvet bucks that they shot with a crossbow and they're like 4. I'm like, yeah, daddy shot that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me, it seems weird that they give you a turkey license and not a deer license, because it seems like turkey hunting with a kid is going to be more chaotic than deer hunting, because how many blinds are already set up when your kid goes with grandpa or whatever deer hunting, they're going to go up into that blind and sit there. You got your one shot you get to take. And with turkey hunting, it's just not predictable. You're all over the place, and they're on the ground and not up in a stand. It just seems like if they let them turkey hunt, why don't they let them deer hunt?
Well, another thing is, turkey hunting, there's a lot of times people get shot turkey hunting. You'd think you wouldn't want to be able to turkey hunt that early versus deer hunting. It kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's a little more dangerous, I guess, for an inexperienced
Yeah, they
hunter.
throw everybody on the ground with camouflage and no orange or nothing for the kids to hunt. So
right, it's kind of seems weird, but
yeah, you hear every year about someone getting shot turkey hunting.
I've seen 2 or 3 posts of people getting shot. It's weird.
Yeah, we got nervous this weekend. Me and my buddy Ben we were sitting on probably like 60 yards from a property line, and there was a gobbler gobbling earlier that morning, and we kind of set our decoys up after we got done hunting in the morning, thinking maybe that gobbler will come out to this field we were sitting over, and all of a sudden we heard like a really crappy crow call. Like it kind of was like suspiciously a crow call. Then we heard a hen yelp, like ow, ow, ow. And it stopped, and then like changed it like to a cluck or something. Like it was a hunter was trying to change his calls or something. But anyway, it didn't sound like a hen. But we had a Jake decoy out in a hen, and we got nervous because we would have been between where that calling was coming from and the bird, and the guy that owns the property is kind of a known. I mean, we've caught him trespassing on other properties, and he's just kind of known for being a little bit Western. You know what I mean? So we got nervous, but nobody ever came to the edge of the woods or anything that we know of, at least.
Yeah, most of our hunting is at the in-laws' place, so we always get comments on the internet when people see us. They're like, "Oh, if you'd be doing that here, you get shot," and all that. And it's like, well, around here, the places that we're at, you stand up, you look all around, you can see about 500 to 1,000 yards in every direction, open fields, and it's know every single neighbor, and I don't, we sometimes don't get as much of a chance on animals, but just the fact that nobody else is there and you can have more freedom to do what you want, it makes it a little easier with a kid with.
There's
like that one day he would take the head of a decoy for a deer without the body during archery season and just hold the head up over his face and just walk right up to does, and he'd get up to him all the time.
Man.
I wonder if that's because like Zeke's son is like, he's like when he's standing, he may be like more of a deer size, you know what I mean? Like
he's doe size, so
yeah. Huh.
I couldn't do it.
Nah.
Maybe if I had a cow decoy.
Right. Yeah. But no, like you said, there's something to be said about having your some land and some good neighbors. Like that's a pretty nice piece of mine. It gets pretty. We hunted a lot of public this last week, and it was, I mean, a lot of people stepping on other people's toes and just worrying about where people were turkey hunting. I don't worry about as much deer hunting as I do turkey hunting for some reason, but I think it's because of the fact that everybody's camo. Some people got decoys out. It makes me nervous. And then, like Patrick said, you see a dozen people get shot every year turkey hunting. Yeah. Now, the amount of lethal, maybe it's not lethal to get shot by a turkey load at 80 yards or something, but it's not very fun. Patrick, you all right over there?
Yeah, I'm just listening.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You look like you're trying to look at something that you can't figure out or something.
No, I'm looking at the screen. I don't know. No, I'm good. I'm just listening.
Okay. That's good. But yeah, Zeke got his first bird and my dad got his first bird.
That's awesome.
Yeah. He'd never turkey hunted growing up, and I bet me and him haven't been turkey hunting more than 3 or 4 times together. And that's, he hasn't been much more now. I think he said he went a couple times when he was young with some buddies, but that was it. He thought it was pretty cool though. Like
is he hooked?
Oh, I kind of get the feeling he is, man.
Looks like y'all are going to be doing some out-of-state trips.
Yeah. He says so we killed that bird at like 3:00, or those birds at 3:00. And he's up for doing that. I don't think he wants to get up at 4 a.m. and go out, which I understand. I don't like getting up early. What's wrong, Patrick? Something's wrong with you.
No, I had to change my mic. I was.
Oh,
I'm looking at this. I'm doing like you do it too. You just don't see yourself doing it because
you sound different.
No, no, I didn't realize I didn't have my plug plugged in over here, so I was on the regular. But
oh, I think you still. Are you sure? Hit the go like this. Okay. Yep, you are.
Yeah, I went on that mic. So
you may have to pull it closer to your face.
Yeah, I was wondering why y'all could hear me good, and I had it kind of far out. Just talk amongst yourselves.
Perfect. Oh, anyway, Zeke, do you like turkey hunting or deer hunting better? Zeke, can
you guys hear me? Am I cutting out?
No, you're good. Can you hear me, Zeke?
You two are cutting out for me though.
Oh, can you hear us now?
Let me try to get a little closer to the door.
Oh, he was worried about that happening.
Oh, what is it?
His internet went out.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a big deal. If he gets back on, great. And if
so, is your dad like hooked now? Is he just like
he thought it was pretty sweet?
Does he not like getting up early, or is he just man? Because y'all ought to go to Ohio too.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. He gets up early a lot for work, and he just doesn't have any desire to get up early when he has a day.
Did y'all get up early that day when you killed those turkeys?
Yeah. No, he got home from work early, and I just texted him like, "Hey, you want to go out to the place we hunt and see if there's any turkeys out there?" He's like, "Yeah, let's go."
Yeah.
That's all that happened. And then, the video's gonna come out tomorrow. So
yeah, I've been waiting on it.
I got it all edited and everything. I just didn't want to put it out tonight because we're doing.
Is it pretty good?
Yeah, it's good.
You get some good footage.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yeah, but I had 2 cameras running the whole time. It's pretty good. It's not a long video again because it happened fast, but it's a good one.
I wonder how those guys like the THP do it, man, because they get a lot of video. I mean, they've got to just be running their cameras the whole time.
Well, they got a cameraman.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they get like the stuff that they get. I would figure you would miss it because it's just like downtime stuff, because we videoed together when you're just walking through the woods and all that. They got to be just always running that camera.
Well, I think what they got going for them is they got like, their cameraman also like edits for them too,
Yeah.
So they just got a lot of, me and you aren't editing for each other,
No, and you usually, man, they hunt a lot of times like 3 guys turkey hunting, which is wild to me. Like, I don't see how you hunt that many people at the same time.
There they are. Can you hear us now?
Can
you hear us now?
Yeah, now we opened up the shop. We opened up the shop door and got closer to the door for some more signal. So
had to put your Pioneer jacket on.
Yep.
Zeke, do you like turkey or deer hunting better? Can you guys not hear us? Is he?
Yeah, he heard us.
You like turkey or deer hunting better?
If you can only do one the rest of your life, which one would it be?
Deer?
Yeah.
He likes deer hunting better, but he likes it that he can do more now with turkey hunting.
Yeah.
So and then you get more action in your turkey hunting.
Yeah. How long have you been turkey hunting? Have you been turkey hunting for a long time, or did you just pick it up to start hunting with him?
I've only shot one tom.
Okay.
I started in 2021, and then the rest has been taking him with. So before that, I never turkey hunted, and so I just kind of got started just
My
lately.
dad and I were like that when we started. It kind of reminded me of my dad. He passed last year, but we started turkey hunting together in 1994, and we didn't know anything. And man, if I knew what I knew now, God, there'd have been a lot of dead turkeys. I can tell you that much. But
was there more turkeys back then?
Huh?
Was there more turkeys than there are now back then?
They weren't hunted hardly, and where we hunted them, like the south of this certain highway, it was the first season it opened. Was the first season we started hunting them, so they were never hunted there. They had stocked them, but they were letting them build up. Well, when they finally built up, we were able to hunt them. And I mean, they were just dumb, and it was just, and if we were half as smart as I am now on turkeys, that'd have been a massacre. I mean, it would have been a 2-bird massacre, but that'd been about
Yeah,
it.
right.
It would have been that much. We'd have been done a lot earlier, but it was a lot of fun, man. Had some great memories back then, just hanging out with Dad and learning how to turkey hunt because he'd been deer hunting like you have too, and so just getting to learn that together with my dad was pretty fun.
Yeah. Well, my dad's not too far behind me turkey hunting. I mean, I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, so I'm starting to get better at it, but I'm not great at it. I still got to ask Patrick for tips and stuff whenever I'm
just glad you're going. Really, you got to go down here, and then you got to go at your home, and you killed a couple of birds. I mean, that's awesome. You're having a good season.
Yeah.
There was hardly any turkeys around here when I was growing up. I mean, there was almost none, and then they started repopulating them. And they actually had farmers buying them and releasing them in the area because they had nothing. And then it wasn't until maybe in my 20s that you started seeing them more.
Yeah, now they're
otherwise as a kid I never seen any of them at all growing up.
Yeah, now they're everywhere. It seems like they're all over the place now.
Yeah. My dad said the same thing. After we got done hunting, we had dinner and stuff, and he's like, yeah, I remember the first time seeing turkeys deer hunting and not knowing what it was. Like, he's like, I remember seeing a bunch of these black birds walking in a line by my tree stand, and he's like, I didn't know, I thought they were buzzards or something. And he said he went home and told my grandpa about it, and he's like, yeah, them are turkeys, man. And that's the first time I ever seen one. It was like, I don't know how old he was, but there just wasn't very many around here.
No, they were almost extinct. It's crazy to think that they've come back the way that they have from being almost gone. And then all 5 of the subspecies that are, in North America and Mexico with the ghouls, it's just amazing. They've separated them and were able to help them out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think all in all, the North America wildlife has benefited from all the things we've done for them. Mm-hmm. I just hope it keeps going that way,
Yeah, I do too. Hope our government doesn't step in and put too many laws and stuff and keep up, because what we do is good for the wildlife, harvesting them, and a lot of people don't see that. The anti-hunters and stuff, they don't see that.
Well, it's not even that. It's just all the money that funds all this stuff is pretty much from hunters and fishermen. I mean, our taxes go to, everything that's sold under a hunting or fishing product is taxed for the reason of conservation. So
yeah,
people stop hunting because of regulations or rules. That money dwindles down.
Speaking of money, I don't know if I told you this or not, but Tennessee finally started crawfishing on the CWD rules this year in their new meeting. They changed some stuff.
Oh yeah, what did they change?
Well, there's no longer a CWD zone anymore. So we had our own special zone where they had, you could kill 3 bucks and 3 does a day, and if you kill 2 does and tag them, you get another buck. I mean, basically unlimited bucks. Well, they went back to a 2-buck rule, and you still have to earn a buck, but they got rid of the 1, and then they shortened the season back to match statewide. So we were able to hunt through the 31st of January. They just shortened it back because it wasn't doing anything. It's not making an impact on the deer. So, they just pushed the season back. So I'm glad they at least did that. Now they kept the stupid turkey season where it is, starting in the middle of the month of April in Tennessee in the South. They still did that, but at least they did something for the deer, somewhat positive. But they keep adding counties, man. It's like, oh, we got one in this county. We're going to add that one to the CWD county list. It's still, the travel restrictions are still there. Like, you bring deer in, but you can't bring them out. And they have all that, but at least they changed some of the rules. So
Indiana got his first case.
I think they're all going to get first cases, man.
Yep. Was just whatever. I think I was actually down there in Tennessee, but wasn't me.
You brought it back.
It was a northern Indiana county. I can't remember exactly which county, but it was up north.
Yeah, they found one over in Arkansas, right across the river. Just one. I think, man, I honestly think that stuff's naturally occurring in deer, and they just started looking for it hard because there's money. They're pumping money behind it. The government's giving money, so they're testing for it, and they're going, "Oh, look what we got." I think it's just something that naturally occurs in deer. It's always happened. Dr. Kroll wrote an article where he had his own deer farm in Texas, his own research facility. And they had a deer there was a research facility, not his, but a research facility. And he wrote a paper on it where a deer came up positive, just came up positive. There's no interaction with other herds. They're all fenced in. Never had a case. And all of a sudden one of them got CWD just out of the blue.
Yeah.
So, that kind of debunks all this. It's spread through,
right.
crazy ways.
Does it work now?
Yeah, it's working.
We're right outside the bedroom where the router is, so it should have connected now.
It looks good now. That's all right.
Yeah.
We've not talked about hardly anything important yet, so
The kids would never be quiet enough for us to go inside.
yeah, that's fine, man. It's no big deal. Anyway, there was something else. Oh, Patrick, I sent you a podcast that as a Chad Wright was complaining about the National Turkey Federation acting like turkeys are the only thing that lives in the woods.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? How turkey hunters are always like, oh, the coons are killing all the turkeys, or all the bobcats or all the snakes are like.
Let me tell you what's happened with turkeys.
Okay.
One, habitat. That's the first thing. The second thing is predator control is important, but there wasn't any predator control back in the 80s and 90s, and there were tons of birds. Since COVID, a lot of brand new green turkey hunters got into turkey hunting, and that's all well and good. But when you're green, as I was one time, you mess a lot of turkeys up, and you do a lot of stupid stuff because you see stuff on TV. Like, I love to hunt public, and I love those guys. But every time they stop on a road and crow call out into the woods, I'm like, oh, because I know there's a lot of people who are new at it that think that that's how it's done. And, they get pretty lucky. They hunt a lot of states too that, in the north where you can kind of get away with that stuff a little more on your turkeys. I've hunted up north. They're different than our turkeys down here in the south as far as pressure. Because, it's kind of like a cultural thing down here in the south where you go to other states, it's not as big of a deal. So I think it's more habitat, hunter pressure, more people killing turkeys is and bothering them in their woods during the spring. I think those are the two main things. And then I think trapping is a necessity, but man, we had turkeys when you didn't trap. So it helps, but I think it's more the habitat and the pressure.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably the number one thing that's going to destroy hunting is governmental issues, and the number two thing is going to be just running out of habitat for them.
Yeah,
to support what we need to have a enjoyable hunt.
Well, they're fragile. They're a fragile species. They're not like deer, right? So you can take a deer and put him in the middle of a city and he'll thrive, right?
Right.
You can't do that with turkeys. Now I see turkeys in the city that have some ground, but they need room to roam. They need to be able to see. If they're not, if it's a lot of thick areas, they don't use that habitat that much because they can't, can't see predators.
They're also real cagey. I mean, they wouldn't feel good being,
Yep.
in the middle of all that stuff going on. I wouldn't imagine.
I mean, I've seen them some thick stuff, but yeah, for the most part, they like open where they can see. Yeah.
You guys want to talk about the Genesis 6, not Genesis 20, Genesis 6?
Let's do it.
I accidentally put Genesis 20 on the Facebook post, but I fixed it real quick. Not real quick, but I think kind of quick. So Genesis 6 is a unique chapter in the Bible, and it's something that, doesn't really get brought up a lot because it's kind of a weird deal. We hear a lot about Genesis just as a kid. You hear about Noah and the ark, and that's all. You hear about the creation in the first part of Genesis, and you kind of hear about bits and pieces in Genesis, but Genesis 6 is oftentimes overlooked for kind of a reason it's weird. It's a really weird chapter. It's a real, it would be a very controversial chapter. Don't you guys think? If I'm talking anything out of my butt, let me know. Especially James.
A lot of
resident
a lot
expert
of
on
people,
Genesis
a
6.
lot of people don't get that if you take away Genesis 6 and you take away the reason for the flood, and that just makes people think that God was just mean and killed a bunch of people.
Yeah,
And I always hear that. I always hear that from people. They always say, "Well, your God is the kind of God that would kill off a whole nation." Well, that if you leave that story out, then a lot of the reasons why he did that,
yeah. And I
the
think
whole point of the story is taken out of context.
it is. And I think that's probably our own faults. Like, so many people know about the story of Noah and Noah's Ark, and they know the story about creation, but they don't know what happened between creation and whatever, the old world or before the flood, or however you want to say it. And Genesis 6 is that story. And it's I want to read like the first 5 verses in chapter 6, because it pretty much sums it up. I'm going to read it slow and kind of talk about it a little bit. And we can talk about it just as a group together. And as always, if you guys have questions or anything in the comments, let me know, because we're all just learning all this stuff and kind of making it up as we go. But Genesis 6, 1 to 5-ish, it says, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. So, at first there wasn't very many people on earth, and it began to be more people naturally. And daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives for all which they chose. So I think what's that saying is, the first thing that it mentions is that sons of God saw daughters of men. And a lot of people don't know, like, what does sons of God mean? And I think the kind of the consensus of that is sons of God means like angelic beings, angels, maybe,
Well, if you look at the whole story, so it says, how Lucifer became Satan. What it was, it was he rebelled against God and wanted to be like God himself. And because of that, there was a rebellion, and I think it was like 1/3 of the angels were cast to the earth, is what the Bible says. So that would be, thousands of maybe tens of thousands, according to what the Bible says. So the earth. So the whole point is they're jealous. So people were created to be children of God. So every single person is born to be more special than the most beautiful angel in heaven, according to what the Bible says. There's the biggest thing that the fallen angels have is they're jealous of us. They want what we have. They want to be able to be saved. They want to be back with God's favor again. So what their whole goal is to try to recreate that. So an angel wants to be, a fallen angel will want to be treated like a god. So when what does a god do? A god creates, a god is worshipped, a god rules. So that's what they came to earth to do. So if you look at so it says there's not a lot said in the early books of Genesis. And one of the reasons there wasn't a lot said is because there actually was a lot said, and the whole world talked about it. And that was just kind of a well-known thing. These books that are in the Bible, they give you just enough to know so you can have faith, you can learn what you need to know to be saved. But a lot of this other stuff is kind of I call it extra credit theology. But like there's the book of Enoch. So the book of Enoch is a very detailed book about Genesis 6. And it was part of the Bible for pretty much the entire history of it until it was taken out, I think, in the 700s by the Catholic Church. And they said it was kind of too psychedelic kind of thing. It was too outrageous to be part of it. But here, and this gets to that ancient aliens thing, in 1947, You know, what happens in 1947? Roswell happens. Everyone starts making movies about aliens and all that stuff. Well, also, that's when the Dead Sea Scrolls are found. And when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, the book of Enoch was right in there with Genesis, Exodus, and all the other books of the Bible. And it was right in there as if that was part of the scriptures. And Jesus himself talked about Enoch. The book of Genesis talks about Enoch. Enoch would have been, I think, Methuselah's dad. And so he wrote a book that explains more details about what happened at that time. And he talks about how the fallen angels come down, and he like gives off names of what a lot of their names was, the main ones. And they would teach people things that they weren't supposed to know. Like it talks about abortion. And this is, 4, 5, 6,000 BC, whatever it's supposed to be. They're talking about the fallen angels were teaching the people abortion. They were teaching them about how to do metal, work with metal, and how to do this and that. So what was happening was they were teaching people things. They were trying to be gods themselves. They were wanting to be worshipped. And then the Bible mentions how they wanted to have their own children, which would be their own creation in their eyes. So the whole purpose of the flood was to get rid of this non-clean creation, that, this contaminated bloodline that God didn't want. And a lot of people think that sounds kind of far out there, but it's what was taught. Like when Jesus would have went to the temple, that's what they would have taught, because that's what they were reading in. That's what the book of Enoch says. That's what every other scripture of that time says. Even when like after Exodus, when Joshua was leading the Israelites back to Israel, there were parts of that where they said that God commanded them to annihilate certain groups of people, and it even said, kill the women and the children, like kill all of them. But then it didn't say that to others. And a lot of people, non-Christians, will hear that, and without the explanation of it, they just think it's a cruel God. But it says that, I think it was in Genesis 6, it says it too, that they were there before and sometime after the flood.
Yep.
Which means they came back. Goliath, they said, had that bloodline in him. And Nimrod had that bloodline in them. But when the Israelites came back from, I don't know if it was the land of Canaan, they said, we're like grasshoppers standing next to them. So they were talking about giants, people that were just not like normal people. And those were the groups that God said, annihilate those ones, take out them, kill all of them. And what it was the flood was to take out, to freshen the world, to get that bloodline gone. And then they continued it afterwards.
Yep. And it is kind of crazy how in the book of Genesis 6, like all that is covered in like 5 verses, and it does seem very, very brief for the amount of this story that is telling it. Like you lack a lot of detail, right?
Yep.
But then I'll just finish 3, 4, and 5 here. It says,
I'm good. I was just wiping off my camera. You're worried about what I'm doing. I'm good.
Oh,
read the Bible.
You look good. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with men, for that he also is flesh, yet his day shall be 120 years. So he kind of sounds like to me, put a little bit of a restriction on how long men will live.
And that's another thing that can be branched off to a huge discussion. See, one of the things that, of course, one of my favorite shows in the 90s was the X-Files. I don't know if you can guess by the way I act all the time talking about some conspiracies. But one of the things that I struggled with was I know that people see things. I know that people experience things. I know that there is this weird stuff out there. How does that line up with the Bible? And I always thought to myself, I have to stop thinking about it because it'll make me question my faith, kind of a thing. Until I started looking into it and realizing, oh, well, that actually is explained by what the Bible says if you look deeper into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that 120 years thing, so I started really looking into like archaeology that proves that what the Bible says. So like before, let's say before the flood, they found like amber fossils with air, like air bubbles trapped inside. And they would do samples on that air. And this would have been from before the flood. And that air was so much thicker that if it was around today, we'd practically hyperventilate. There's so much more oxygen. Like you'd take a breath in and go running with your breath held because you'd have so much body. That's how much more oxygen there was in the air. And then pre-flood, like there's dragonflies that are about 3 feet wide. And they do the math and they say that dragonfly couldn't fly today. The air isn't thick enough. And like a pterodactyl, the air is not thick enough today for them to fly. They would just fall to the ground and they would suffocate. Like a lot of these dinosaurs could not live today because the air is so thin that it would suffocate. Well, if you take the world we have and perfect it and then shove a whole bunch more air into it, what will you have? You'll have giant trees, animals that are just way tougher and bigger and can grow larger, people that can live longer. So before the flood, people were able to live to that hundreds and hundreds of years, and animals were able to grow a lot larger and bigger than what they are today. And after, yep, go over there. But animals were able to get larger. Like a lot of the stuff, you look at these ancient animals and you're like, oh, this is an ancient descendant of a beaver and they were the size of a Volkswagen. It's like, no, that was just how big beavers used to get. And they're like, oh, and here's and then if you look at like a Neanderthal skull, they talk about this as like some subspecies of human. But when you look at them, their brains are bigger than ours. Their wisdom teeth fit in good. Their teeth look like they're big enough and strong enough to last hundreds and hundreds of years. And they said the average one could bench 500 pounds. So then they say like, well, their faces look different. Well, they have larger brows, bigger noses. Well, those are all things that keep on growing on a human the older you get. So you ever see, an old grandpa, they got kind of big brows and big noses and big ears. And if you take a person and have them live many, many hundreds of years with this heavier skeleton, they're going to look like the skeleton of a Neanderthal, which is just a more perfect version of a person. And that's you look at archaeology like that, and you can start bringing practically everything back to line up with what the Bible says, instead of just saying, well, we just have to forget about that. We just have to ignore that, which is what I used to do until I started looking into it.
I wonder why pastors don't talk more about Genesis 6. I mean, like my wife.
I think it's weird too.
Yeah, my wife, when we started watching, there's a guy named Billy Carson that talks about the Emerald Tablets. They predate the Bible, but there's an Epic of Gilgamesh and some other stuff in it that is basically identical to the flood and Noah. There's also another person in there that he believes to be Jesus before Jesus was thought, I think is his name, was an architect of all the pyramids and stuff. It's wild stuff. And when you start hearing it, you're like, so this guy, and some of his stuff is theories. But the stories that are in there, I assume he's read the tablets, and he's been on all the major podcasts. So I would imagine if he's been on like Joe Rogan and some of these other, he's probably a pretty credible guy. And he believes that Jesus was real too. So, like to answer, like my thing is why preachers don't talk about it is because some people would lose faith. But the thing is our faith is placed in Jesus Christ, not in the Old Testament and what happened before then. So, Jesus proved his validity. And for anybody watching too, just in case you're thinking we're a bunch of nutballs, we're all Christians. But Jesus proved his trustworthiness by the way he lived and died and resurrecting. So it doesn't affect your Christianity to question the Old Testament. It actually kind of, and I think we all question too, who is God? Like, who is he? What is he? We really don't know. We know what he's done, and we know what he's created, and we get a glimpse of it through Jesus Christ. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of questions around who is God. We know who Jesus is, right? And I think he was that physical example to us so that we can actually kind of understand and who God is and what he wants for us. But, just to kind of clarify, anybody going, what are they talking about? This stuff's in the Bible and it's vague, but what you're saying about the book of Enoch and what I've seen this Billy Carson say about these emerald tablets and the way that the pyramids are just inexplicable of why they are so perfect where they are and what they do kind of lines up with, hey, like, why are we missing this section of the creation and the history of the earth? It's almost like they started it and you're like, well, we kind of got to address this, but we're just going to make it really short and sweet. And then they're like, all right, Noah flood. Now we're going to go on to Israel. And that's kind of where the Bible really begins, because until Josh brought it up in a podcast, I've read Genesis. I didn't remember this and how weird it is. And then when you read it and you go, man, that's some weird stuff. You kind of do what you did. You kind of want to dig a little deeper and understand, where does this come from? What does it mean? And why don't we talk about it more?
Another thing too, I think a lot of people don't want to talk about it because when you start saying things that sound like you mentioned Gilgamesh, and they talk about Noah in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and so Noah would have been Turkey. Then underneath that is a site called Gebel Tepe, and that's like an ancient temple, one of the oldest sites in the world, where on the pillars there's animals carved all over the place.
Oh,
and I believe it was a temple from Noah's days where Noah made a temple for God. And the animals are all carved on there. It's literally right underneath the mountains of Ararat in Turkey, like right Turkey and Iraq come together.
Mm-hmm.
Then south of that, you had Eridu and Uruk and Ur, and that's where Tower of Babel, Gilgamesh, Nimrod, Ishtar, all that was. And there's thousands of tablets that tell these stories over there. And I think what a lot of pastors do is they like to just say, la, 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 don't believe that, don't listen to that. It's all made up stories. But these were people that seen things, that heard things, and they wrote down what they seen and heard. Mm-hmm. And just because it's from another's, in this sounds bad hearing it, but just because it's from another person's faith that they wrote down doesn't mean that they're not seeing what they're writing about.
Right.
So this where the fallen angels come into play. So the fallen angels, their goal was to be gods. That's what they wanted. That's why they got kicked out of heaven. And they did just that. So when you look in the Bible, I mean, where do you think these stories from all these ancient false gods come from? I mean, there's some pretty elaborate stories, and these people will sacrifice their children to them.
Yep.
It isn't just, in Thor and Marduk and all that stuff. I mean, it isn't just a thing where, like, well, this guy made this thing up, so we're just going to listen to him. They most likely seen these things, seen them do miracles. They were things by them. They were led by them, and they worshiped them. And so when you got the Enkidu, which was the gods in ancient Sumeria, well, they said that they came down. That's where most of the ancient alien history comes from. When you watch the show, is, well, the Enkidu, they said they came from this planet or whatever. Mm-hmm. And what their goal is to make people not believe in the one true God and worship them. That's their whole goal.
Yep.
And so you can look up ancient history and false gods to every culture, and most likely there is truth to it. You just have to know what it is that they were worshiping, what they were following, and the background to it. And really there was
make you think like that. What you said so far really makes you think. Like, it makes sense too.
Yeah, because I was in Iraq. I seen the ziggurat of Ur. I seen where King Nimrod ruled. I seen Uruk, where the Tower of Babel would have been, and Eridu, or no, I think that's Eridu, or the Tower of Babel was, but Uruk is where Gilgamesh was, and all that stuff's there. There's remnants of it. They find it. They find statues of the people, and it's all based in history, and people like to just ignore that because they say, well, we just want to follow this over here, and it's like, well, you still do. But at the same time, you can just bring everything back to that.
Mhm.
You know, like it says, you know, it literally says in the end times, it'll be as the days of Noah. Well, if people aren't studying what the days of Noah were like, they're not going to know. And it also says that people were eating, drinking, and getting married right up to the very end. They did not know that there was a problem until the flood came.
Mhm.
So if people, that's the way it's going to be this time too. People are just going to be complacent and think there's nothing going on. Everything's normal. Well, unless you kind of find out what that pre-flood world was like, you're not going to be ready for when he comes the second time.
Right.
Yeah. And so I kind of want to go back to the Genesis 6 here, and like, because we went real deep into it, but the second verse in 6 says that the sons of God saw the daughters of men. So that means these fallen angels are the sons of God. I'm kind of gathering.
Yep.
And the daughters of men, which would be men, humans, right?
Humans. Yep.
Send
And
us
they saw they
Adam
were-
and Eve.
Yep. And they saw that they were fair. They chose them as wives and conceived with them. And then in 4, God goes on to say, and then there were giants on the earth in those days and after that day. So I'm kind of assuming the offspring of those people are what it was created, right? With the giants.
And they were called the Nephilim.
Yep. And it also says that they were old men and renowned, which means renowned means they're well known.
Yep.
So there were some kind of a being greater than humans.
Yep.
So that's what 6 is about, and God was not cool with that.
No.
He did not
And
like that.
you know, human. And another thing too, to really break into why God didn't like that was the whole purpose of people is, people always say, what's the meaning of life? Well, the meaning of life is God wants to create heaven, but he only wants people there that have proven themselves to love him. So that's the whole purpose of life, this is a proving ground to see who is going to love me, who's going to be one that I can trust, so I can make my perfect city. Because you can't create something and force that thing to love you, because then it's fake. You have to give them a choice, and then you get the choice. So the whole purpose of life is to create this perfect world in heaven. This is just a stepping stone to get there. So if that's the whole purpose of the earth, is his people, his children, and all of a sudden that's contaminated, well, then that's the whole purpose of what he was doing. Is you might as well scrap it at that point, because it's no longer his people, it's their people.
Yeah. And then shortly after 1 to 5, that's kind of where God chooses Noah to to be the chosen family that continues on. And a lot of people speculate Noah was still a perfect human for those days, whatever that means.
Pure blood, pure bloodline.
Pure, not perfect. Yeah, pure is a better word.
You know, I saw something too, and I didn't know this, but the word Semite comes from Shem, his son that repopulated. I didn't know that. That you hear all the anti-Semites. I never understood where Semite.
Noah had 3 sons, right?
Shem, Japheth, and
Ham.
the other one?
Ham.
Yeah.
Ham would have been the
Ham, like ham. Yeah, ham.
Yep. He would have been like Africa and the Middle East area, or Africa would have been. I don't remember what it was, but
That's all right.
they all came from them. But yeah,
Shem was where the Jews came from. Shem, correct?
Yes, yes.
The Jews came from Shem. That's why they're Semite. I think they shortened it to Semite from Shem. I believe that's
And I think it was Ham that Africa and Egyptians and like King Nimrod and all them came from.
right.
There you go. So that's the story of why God, a very short version of the story of why God destroyed the earth and saved Noah and his family. That's the reason why. All right, here's a deeper discussion that may take us a while. So, where do you guys think we are compared to where Noah was in those days? How close are we to God being like, the heck was this now? We got to start over.
Well, you know, one thing I keep on seeing over and over again is all these shows about ancient technology. And well, if there is some truth to that, well, we got a lot of technology now, so that would be one comparison now compared to them then. And you kind of think that God created the world. He started off with a garden and living off the land. And the more the fallen angels got involved, the more he didn't like that. And the fallen angels taught them things and taught he didn't like the Tower of Babel. He didn't like the big city thing. He liked that you go out and you work the land and you go live close to him in nature. And I don't know, there's some things that I mean, the whole history of humans, there was no internet, there was no phones, there was no TV. So this is a time where the whole world can see something all at once, and that's the first time in history. And I honestly think that that's got to be a big player in the end times. That's literally the one thing they never had before, that all of a sudden they have now. They always.
I was going to say, I hope. Another thing is this artificial intelligence. I think when we create life, whatever the artificial intelligence, I mean, if it's a sentient being and it can think for itself and it's got its own mind and will,
when we start being God,
we're
trying to create life,
becoming gods, and I don't think he's going to be very happy about that.
No,
because we're not supposed to create. We
no.
Nothing on earth can create anything, as far as biological alive. You know what I mean? We can reproduce, but we cannot create. That's God's job. And I think when we create this artificial intelligence, I don't think it's going to be good. I don't think it's already not good. I saw an article today where a guy used AI to pin a bunch of inappropriate rants, racist and anti-Semitic rants on his principal of his school to get back at him. And they caught the guy, but the other guy the principal got death threats because the AI fake was so good. They thought it was him. So I think that's going to be a moment in time where we're really going to be overstepping our bounds.
Mm-hmm.
James, you said earlier about God liking us living close to the land, living off the land, and not necessarily approving of some of this, big stuff that goes on now. He actually mentions that later on in Genesis about how he wanted Noah to bring on the animals and the vegetables or whatever it was for them to live off of in the future. And I didn't really put that together until you said that. Then is like, oh, maybe that's why he mentions that specifically in Genesis.
And in with Adam and Eve, part of the deal when they got kicked out of the garden was you had to go out and farm the land and deal with weeds and get out there. And I always think when I work in my own garden, I'm like, there's something to that. Like, you're supposed to. I mean, it's kind of part of our deal. He said you're supposed to do that, and I honestly feel like, and I think anybody who has gardened before kind of feels a little different when they're out there working and growing their own food, and there is something almost spiritual about it. It's something you feel like it's something you're supposed to do. And
also pulling weeds. Everybody hates doing that. Yeah, it's like your punishment for whatever. I guess
I'd rather have the childbirth pains than to deal with weeds, because you just do it 4 times and I'm done.
Yeah, I spray them with Roundup in my career with the landscaper, which Roundup is the devil.
Rogers used a little bit of that technology.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, you got a good point. I mean, the technology for food, I mean, and everything that we look at that we just have such access to. I mean, I think, these aliens is what we call them, which are probably more demons and angels, angelic beings and demons. I think they've shown people stuff, and that's why we're progressing so fast. In the whole time of human existence, in the last 20 years, we have jumped by leaps and bounds, and not in a good way. And anything that happens too fast, you're going to hit a brick wall eventually, because it's just too fast. I mean, from if I look back to when I grew up as a teenager in the 90s, and then you look at where Zeke's growing up now. I mean, it's crazy. I would have never thought. Look, I mean, we're talking in live real time through a piece of equipment here, which is good because we're talking about God and creation, but it can be used for bad things too. So, and I think it's used for a lot more of that than good. Yeah.
20 years ago on movies about the future, we didn't have the technology that we actually have from those movies that they thought the future was going to be like.
Yep. And now we have it just like they said, just about, except for the flying car and the hoverboard. Which I like to see.
Speaking of end times with that, it's, what easier way to have the mark of the beast than with Bitcoin, with like digital currency? Because I mean, like for thousands of years ago, they would have said, how could you not buy things? You just trade for it. They wouldn't have the concept of that. There's no such thing as a concept of not being able to buy something unless you have a mark, because they could just trade for it. There was always ability to buy or sell, because somebody needed something that you had, you traded for it.
Mm-hmm.
But now all of a sudden they're doing social credit scores in some countries. They can cut your bank off like that, and they are, that's I think one of the biggest goals is to make people have to rely on the government. So you have to do what they say. And then if they say, well, you have to do this, or you don't get to do this, more people are going to go through with it, just because they can't go out and get their own food. They can't go out and get their own water. And for the first time in history, most people cannot live out on their own.
Oh yeah. A lot of people would die if we ever just had a blackout. It'd be, people just starve to death. They wouldn't know how to do it if there's no grocery store.
I think it's 3 days, 3 days of food supply in New York City at a time. If they don't truck it in, the whole city's out of food in 3 days.
Wow.
That's pretty quick.
And then you were saying before about the angels, or fallen angels and demons. That's another thing that the Book of Enoch explains what the differences are. So fallen angels are still what they are. They're fallen angels. They have power. They can make themselves look like whatever they want to. They can trick people. They're an angel just like the rest of the angels. So they're just restricted. But then the demons are the spirits of the Nephilim after they died. Because the Book of Enoch says that once they die, they are not allowed to go to heaven. They are meant to, it literally says that they are going to just stay on the earth and torment people. And that's where demons come from. They are the offspring of the fallen angels. So when people think of a fallen angel, they're like legitimately a powerful angelic being. And the demons are the spirits of those ancient Nephilim. So when people say, they got a demon in their house, when they talk about possession, when they talk about all that stuff, that's where that comes from. These ancient spirits from the Nephilim.
Interesting.
That is interesting. I've never heard that before.
There's a lot of stuff when I was listening to those emerald tablets, man, and that guy was talking about, I've always thought, and I think we're taught in school too, like all the Aztec temples, the Mayan temples, and all that stuff. They didn't build those. Those were built by this thought guy, according to these emerald tablets. And they're all, a lot of the pyramids I know, I'm not going to say all of them because I would be talking out of line, but I know a lot of them are super like hydroconductors. energy. They're over big hydro sources. They just found a huge one down in, well, they didn't just find it, but there's a huge one down in Antarctica. It's the biggest one around. It's like 2 miles by 2 miles by 2 miles, whatever, on all sides. And they found that down there, as well as, plant life they found there too. So the world wasn't always what we're looking at. We've got to remember that when we look at these ancient texts and these things that have been around for years, and kind of, I do wish more pastors would do more studying on it and not be afraid to say what it is. I mean, it's there in the Bible. If you believe in the Bible as the book of the world and how it created, yes, there's some stuff left out, and I'm sure there's some stuff that's been edited, but it is supernatural that book has been preserved, I believe, through the will of God for thousands of years, to let us know where we come from. There's just a lot of things in there that we need insight on. The New Testament for me is pretty cut and dry. If you read the gospel and then the rest are letters basically telling people how to live and basically telling churches that aren't living the right way or teaching the right teachings, right? And then the revelations of John. But, that's a pretty easy book. But, man, that Old Testament stuff's really hard. And I think a lot of pastors and churches just stay away from it. They want all the good news, which is fine. Like, the good news is the good news, right? But we need to. It's kind of cool to know the history and just kind of keep it where it's at. Because if your faith and like going back to what Zeke said, and I said a little while ago, if your faith is in Jesus Christ, it doesn't change. It should not change your faith in Jesus because you're looking at other things. I mean, why would you not think it's possible it speaks about angels. So why would you not think it's possible that angels did what they did in Genesis 6? And that's the reason for the flood. I knew the flood was there because man became evil. I didn't know it was there because of what we've talked about tonight until I started studying it. And it's in the Bible. Like, I'm sure people that are Christians are probably going, what are these guys talking about? Just go read Genesis 6, man. It'll leave you with some questions.
And, with that, you're talking about like pyramids all over the place. If you just ignore all the other history in the world, it's going to discredit you when you try to tell your history from the Bible. Mm-hmm. But if you look into all the history in the world, it all lines up and points back to the Bible. Mm-hmm. They're like, there's a reason there's a show called Ancient Aliens. It's there is unexplainable things unless you know the truth that people are trying to figure out. It's like there are things in South America that line up with things in Egypt, that line up with things in ancient Sumeria and other places where pyramids are set up the exact same way. They both have statues in the same poses, holding the same things, and they want you to do the same things. And people say, well, it must have been aliens. Well, it's what they thought was aliens. I believe that these are all the same fallen angels that were traveling the world, like getting other people in the world to worship them. Yeah. And they teach these people, this is what I want. This is what I want you to do. And, look at all the human sacrifices in South America. They're not going to just do that unless they seen something to convince them to have that much faith that they're going to sacrifice people for it.
Right.
If you just look at all of those religions in the world and just one thing, understand that that's the fallen angels trying to become gods themselves, it all makes sense. It all lines up, and it actually all lines up to the point where it literally spreads out as a timeline from the Fertile Crescent in ancient Mesopotamia, which is right under where Noah's Ark would have been. It literally, it starts off in Iraq, and it moves off to Persia over here and Egypt over here. Then it moves off a little more up here, and you can actually see through history it spreads from that one spot.
Yeah. So interesting, man.
Yeah, it is, man. I could think about this stuff all day long.
You brought up Antarctica too. I have a theory, and that's 100% just my theory on it about Antarctica. But so during the flood, when the water started going down, the poles froze of the floodwaters, and that's why there's like miles thick of just water on the bottom of the earth that's ancient water. Like they do tests on it and they say, oh, it's this many thousands of years old. Well, like there's literally walls around it where it's just a giant wall of ice, as if it was the whole world used to be that deep, but it just froze there.
Yeah.
And my theory is that underneath Antarctica is where the Garden of Eden was, because the Bible did not say they were going to destroy it. They said they were going to guard it. So he put an angel to guard it with his flaming sword in front of the garden to keep people out of it, not to destroy the garden. And the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, according to the Bible, should still exist. So he didn't say he was going to destroy him. He said he was going to keep people out of it. So if there was a flood, and that's where the Garden of Eden was, which would have them separated from everywhere else, it would be a way to cover the whole thing in ice, keep people out of it, and then move everybody, have that ark drift up north until it lands in a new area.
Yeah.
And like you said, they found tropical stuff underneath there before. They found all sorts of plants, like whole ecosystems under the ice. And like any conspiracy theorists will know that there's really fishy stuff going on there. There's like 50 some countries in the world that have a treaty signed where they're like they won't attack each other. They share it. Even I think Hitler was in on that, like where they had this weird treaty about Antarctica.
Mm-hmm.
And you're actually not allowed to fly over it. They'll shoot you down, and their excuse is because if you crash, they don't want to have to save you, so they'll just kill you instead.
Yeah, that's a good reason.
So there's a lot of weird stuff going on down there, and to me, it's like it's a giant thing of ice, as if the flood froze over and hid something underneath it. So that's just one of my theories.
Well, but that makes sense. Even your theory is a good theory too. So, but it's a theory like anything else.
Yep.
And I'm not saying I agree or disagree with it, but what you're saying about the ice covering it up, if you look in the Sahara Desert, I think it's a Sahara Desert in Africa, you can see a washout over there from where the water receded out back to the sea. And, those poles being where they are and being colder, when that flood, if you think about it, when the flood from Noah would have covered the earth the way that the Bible says it did, okay, whatever the earth, I'm sure the earth and the inhabited earth was probably a lot smaller then than what it is now for sure. But maybe that was the inhabited earth, like you're saying, say Garden of Eden, and they had the pyramids there and they had them up in in Africa and everything too. Well, when it flooded and Noah was the only one, and he went till he found dry land, right, which was up north and where they repopulated back into Africa. And, because it doesn't talk about where we were before, right? They always say the cradle of civilization is Africa. Well, maybe not. It could be Antarctica. But Antarctica being frozen solid like it has been forever, and it's thawing now, it would make sense that if all that was, if the climate was different and all that changed and there was a shift or whatever, then that would have covered all that. There's so much evidence probably underneath that, that somebody probably knows a little bit more than we do. But
with Pangea, I don't know if you know about Pangea, but they said that all the land in the world used to connect, and it slowly drifted apart. Like you can see, everything would fit together like a puzzle. And a lot of people's theories is during the flood, all them broke apart when the water come up from underneath. So before, it could have been one giant landmass, and then when the flood happened, it was all split up to keep people more separated.
Yeah, well, and it's also in the Bible. I was thinking about this earlier when you were talking about how God wants us to farm and stuff, and this isn't about farming, but I'm working the land and everything. But God likes nations. God likes borders. Okay. There's a lot of people that say, well, with what's going on in our country with the immigration and stuff, and other countries too are dealing with it. They say, oh, well, what would Jesus say about that? What does God say about it? Well, God's very strict. Like, he likes borders, because when you get one country and a bunch of melded in people and everybody's on the same level, then God is not as powerful as what government becomes. And he designed nations and for us to have nations so that we would not have one government that became our God. So,
which is literally the Tower of Babel.
Right, exactly. And that's why what you're saying with basically the earth, whatever happened, and the spread, maybe spreading out the lands, to put people different places to repopulate. That way you didn't have the same problems as he had prior to that, when everybody's basically started in one place. I'm sure as perfect as God is he's made mistakes that he can fathom, with the earth, and he foresees everything because he's 10 minutes ahead of us. He's thousands of years behind us all at one time, and he's right here present with us all at one time. But, I'm sure that when he created earth, his intention wasn't for it to be like it is. And, he's probably had to learn some things from that himself, I would imagine. Of course, he's living in linear time. Like, he's everywhere. So he knew, but he didn't know. But I don't know. I'm trying to guess what God thinks, I guess.
See, and that's another one of my biblical theories that I always wonder about is, they say a minute in heaven is like 1,000 years on earth, and then vice versa. Like, he's not bound by time. So I always wondered, people argue about the age of the earth and all this stuff. How old was Adam? Things like that. And I always wonder, well, if the Garden of Eden was perfect, was the Garden of Eden bound by time at that time? So is it a thing where when Adam and Eve were in the garden, the world was on regular time, and in the garden it was perfect? And that would make it so that when they got out, how much has already happened outside, but that was that perfect area that lined up with heaven's time. Yeah, so that's another theory that you never know. Like, that could be like the one thing that would bring everything together with everything that certain scientists that are against creation would believe about how old the earth is, things like that. But if somebody thinks they know everything, they're 100% wrong. You have to understand that there is a ton that you'll never know. There's a ton that you have to say, this is a guess, this is a theory. And if as soon as you start saying this is 100%, then that's when to stop trusting somebody. Yeah. Because there's so much that you will never know. Like this for me, this is just a hobby because it actually helps me strengthen my faith. But and then it helps you, like, let's just say you meet an atheist that's in evolution, and then this just kind of helps you talk to them a little better. Or you hear a guy that says, well, you're the only religion that counts, so then you can bring back every religion to the base of where it all started, So for me, it's just another tool to have to help you out with talking to other people.
It's good because when you talk to non-believers and stuff like that, and they say, like what Josh was saying, and I think you were saying, they say, oh, God's so cruel, he kills all these people. There's a reason for that. There's think of it as a field, and you have weeds growing in your field, and you don't want it. You want a perfect field of corn. You got to get rid of those weeds or they'll choke out your corn. So God, I would imagine that God looks at us somewhat as his field, and he's constantly working on us. And so he's constantly pulling weeds, and the devil's always at work. And he kind of oversees this world, but he won't win, in the end. But yeah, it's interesting. And when you see people talk about the evolution and the single cell organisms and how we all think, it doesn't make sense. When you look at Adam and Eve in the Bible, the only way we could live to be where we are now is if we were grown adult humans when we got here. Because you can't set Josh can't set Hayes in a field and go, oh, he's going to be fine. No, he'd be dead. You know what I mean? And we would have been too at the start of everything. So the only rational thing that makes sense to me is God created two adult human male and an adult female, and we were to grow from then, and they were to care for their young and so on and so forth. That's where we got. And so that's where I think a lot of the evolutionary people and the believe in the, Big Bang and all that stuff, I think that's where they just lose ground if they'll admit it. It's impossible, to just come from that.
I get wrapped up in thinking like, you go down this circle of like, of course, we all think about where we came from and all that and where God comes from. But to think about like, okay, it's hard to think like you were created, but then, who created the creator and on and on and on. And man, it can be a very confusing thing to think about. Like the world, God created the world, but it's like, I don't know. It's like trying to figure out who God is again, going back to that.
I think it's probably equal to us trying to explain how to rebuild an engine to an ant. Their brains just can't comprehend it. I honestly think our brain, like if God tried to explain it to us, we would not be able to understand it.
Yeah.
I don't think our brains could comprehend. And then another thing too is this world was created to house spirits for the real world, which is God's world. So that world is a whole different world. It's a spiritual world. And this is just an in-between world that was created for our spirits. Because when this is over, it's our spirits that live on and God, the Holy Spirit's God is in that whole different world. So I guess as much as we can understand, I guess you could explain it to people like it's a other dimension or a type of thing. But again, it's beyond us being able to understand.
Mm-hmm. You shouldn't even really even try to question it. I mean, we're going to, because we're humans and we question everything.
Right.
But at the end of the day, like you said, that was a really good analogy. Like you're talking to an ant about how to rebuild a car engine. You're so far ahead of that ant. Maybe they're farther ahead of us. I don't know. They do some pretty cool stuff to be an ant. But, we don't speak the same language. So you'll never understand. But it's really cool to have these discussions and just get people thinking, about the creator and why. And some of it makes more sense, especially like Genesis 6. When you start telling people that, I think even an atheist or someone that's agnostic or whatever is going to go, man, that's kind of a cool story.
Yeah.
What's all this about? And then maybe they'll open their Bible and they'll read and they'll go, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I understand why this happened with this Noah guy, and why that became.
And the problem is there's too many people who don't know the whole story, and then they get confronted with it, or they just like you see a lot of comments like on Facebook where people are saying this, and then they get bombarded with the non-Christians underneath, and they're not prepared to argue what they first said. They like you were saying before, how you wondered why pastors don't look into this stuff more, and like they have I think it was the year 311 Constantine started the Catholic Church. Well, his mom, she took a trip to Israel and wanted to find relics and artifacts. They were really big on relics back then. Well, she found a spot that she thought was Mount Sinai, so they marked it down. They built a church and said, okay, this is Mount Sinai. And then they said, well, she found a spot that she thought was the crossing of the Red Sea, and they marked it down. And then they said, well, they found all these spots. And if you look on a lot of Bibles and a lot of church maps, it says, oh, this is where they went. But then you look into it, and now that we know more, now that we have GPS, I can find the Red Sea crossing on X. Actually,
yeah.
I've done it before.
Yeah,
and now that we can actually see what it is, you can see that she was completely wrong, and we actually found it now. And they found artifacts, they found chariot wheels, they found horse skeletons, they found the only way. Actually, they actually found a pillar that said this pillar was said to be put here by King Solomon to mark the spot of the Dead Sea crossing or the Red Sea crossing. So literally it said, this is where it was. King Solomon said, I told you to put this here. So, and so now we have proof of that. And then in Saudi Arabia, we weren't allowed to go to Saudi Arabia for a long time. That's why it hasn't been looked into. And then I think it was Ron Wyatt, the archaeologist, him and his sons snuck into the country and took a whole bunch of pictures and found Mount Sinai with the black on the whole top of the mountains, just black burnt. It's still black to this day. They found the big stone with the giant split down the middle that has water erosion coming out each side, where Moses hit the rock and the water come out for the Israelites to drink. They found a giant stone that had like an Egyptian style cow or calf carved into it in petroglyphs, but not an Egyptian style writing. Mm-hmm. So that would have been literally where they had the golden calf. Like it really showed this is where we're going to have a golden calf, but Egyptians didn't write it.
Right.
It was in more of a Hebrew type. So it's all there. Like there's so much proof that this all happened. It's literally like you can see the spots. There's pictures of it all over the internet. It's like if you just sit there and Google this stuff, it's just all out in the open.
The burnt
like
sand, the burnt sand that's glass too, where the pillar
Yeah.
of flame came down. That's
Yep.
that's a big thing I've been seeing a lot of. That's in there in the Red Sea too, where they crossed.
Yep. And it literally says they were out of Egypt, and that means they couldn't have been by the Red Sea when they started getting chased. And so what would happen? They were chased down a riverbed with a mountain on each side. So it was a thing where they had to be in a straight line. So the soldiers were behind them. They were in front. If they were out in the desert, the soldiers would have just surrounded them. But God sent a pillar to protect them. Well, a pillar meant something straight up and down. Well, that blocked the pathway that they were on. Well, they found that pathway. They found the giant beach that was big enough to have that many people. And I remember saying, oh, that's wrong, that map, in a church before. And they're like, no, it isn't. It's over here. It's all written down. We found it years ago. And I'm like, that's going to make somebody not believe you. That's going to make somebody not become a Christian, because they're going to say, well, if they proved you wrong over here, that must mean I can't believe you over here.
Right.
And I think that hurts the church a lot, because there is, like, the Bible's a Bible, but there's a lot of things that aren't in the Bible that they've been doing since hundreds of years after Jesus was gone, or maybe even 1,000 years.
Yeah.
And they almost stick to that doctrine more faithfully than the Bible itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when they start a lot of people, they actually look into it. And you got Google, you got phones, you got YouTube. You can actually search this stuff a lot easier now than you used to. And if people are just ignoring facts, it's going to chase people away from God instead of bringing them in.
Yeah. Well, too, the biggest thing is the Old Testament. The best thing you can do to bring people to Christ, which is bringing them to God as well, is to just tell them about Jesus and what Jesus said, and then go to prove his reliability through the way he lived, and then the evidence. See, I don't believe in Jesus because a pastor told me. I don't believe in Jesus because my parents told me. I don't believe in Jesus because I went to church when I was a kid. I don't believe in Jesus because of things I've heard. I believe in Jesus because the evidence is there that he lived the way he lived. He died the way he died. He forgave people on the cross. And the historicity of it, when you look and you see seen by over 500 people, all the stuff that points to that he was there. And then what he did, if Josh dies tomorrow and resurrection 3 days, I'm going to listen to him really intently, and I'm going to believe what he says, because that just doesn't happen. Right. So that's where you get with people who don't believe in Christ, and you say, well, look, this is why, not because it's a religion, not because it's a cult and all this. A lot of people think it's a colonialism thing. It's not. The Bible was in Africa long before it was in Europe. And so it's not that what people think it is. Jesus is the truth because of what he showed us through his actions, the way he lived a sinless life, the way he died a death we should have died, and came back. And then, the Jews, there's a huge section of Jews that started celebrating the Sabbath on Sunday instead of Saturday. And then, things like how we count time, it's by the birth of Christ, after his birth. There's so many things that change because of this one person. You can't get all of mankind together to agree on who's the best president, or who is the best football player,
or if the earth is round or flat,
or the earth is round or flat, or anything. The pyramids were built by man or alien, or that aliens exist. You can't get people but you got everyone to believe that this man was worthy of the changes that everyone made at that time. Before these churches, before the Catholic Church, before all these big organizations, which, are only there to exist most of the time, and saw the power in Christ and use that, I believe, to become bigger organizations. But that's down a rabbit hole. But if you just look at Christ and what he did, then I mean, to me, it's undeniable. You can't argue it.
Another thing too, when people think of like the Bible itself, a lot of people disconnect the Old Testament from the New Testament. They say they have nothing to do with each other. They say that that it's just a whole bunch of different, like they made things up in the future. To like, there's all sorts of different excuses, but I thought this was kind of neat where there's so many little hidden prophecies and messages in the Bible that aren't even hardly noticeable unless you study them. But like if you take the first people, their first names in the Bible, so you take Adam and then his son Seth, Enosh, all the way down to Noah, and then you take the definitions of what their names mean. So Adam means man, Seth means appointed, Enosh means mortal, Kenan means sorrow, Mahalalel is blessed, the blessed God, Jared means shall come down, Enoch means teaches, Methuselah is his death shall bring, Lamech is despairing, and Noah means comfort and rest. So if you take all the definitions and just read it like a sentence, it literally says that Jesus is coming. It literally says, man is appointed mortal sorrow, but the blessed God shall come down teaching, his death shall bring the despairing comfort and rest. So that's literally the definition of all their names read in a sentence. It literally prophesies Jesus coming.
There's a lot of that in the Old Testament. I read back and read Isaiah because there's a lot of it in Isaiah. After I read the gospel, I went to Isaiah because I wanted to read about the prophecy. And I mean, it's almost to the T how Jesus came to be, and you could say it was, somebody saw the story and said, oh, we're going to recreate this. But man, to fool everyone for so long, come on, man, something big happened 2024 years ago on this earth.
And a lot of people had to give up their lives for that. And if they were just all on a big scam, they were pretty hook, line, and sinker. I mean, think of all those the Romans that gave their lives up after they were converted. Like they had nothing to gain, nothing to gain at all from that.
Right. Yeah. And all of his disciples and all the people that were killed, you don't die for a lie. You die for what you saw as truth. And, there's just too much there. When people, if you don't want to believe in the Bible because you want to sin, okay, I'll give you that. Just say it, because you want to live in sin without consequences in your mind, that just say it. But if you really sit there and like study this stuff and just say there is absolutely no way, I can't think you're being, think you're being honest.
Yeah,
Right,
the more I dived into everything, the more it just brought me right back to the Bible.
Yep.
We got to leave something to talk about next week.
I'm just barely scratching the surface.
I know, man. We could just go on and on and on and on.
And I'm just over here going, keep going.
Yeah.
Josh is over here like he's like a dad. Like, all right, y'all, time to go to bed.
No, it's all good stuff, man.
Yeah.
No, I learned a lot this episode because James has researched this a lot.
Yeah, I'm gonna look up.
A lot of hours sitting in a truck or a tractor, and I just press play on a podcast or a documentary and listen to it. Or I'll every summer I go through. I actually will just go on YouTube or go on some deal and just hit audio Bible, press play, turn the screen off, throw it aside, and I can go through entire books a day. Yeah. And sometimes you speed it up in some spots, you can slow it down for other spots. And I've gone through the book of Enoch how many times. I've gone through the Epic of Gilgamesh. I've listened to just any documentary I could find. And if you really want to dive into stuff, there's a guy named Trey Smith, and he has a site called God in a Nutshell. And that guy, it's really hard to follow a lot of times because he's like, the way he thinks, it's just one thing after another.
It's the way
But,
that guy Billy Carson is that talks about the emerald tablets. Sorry to interrupt, but I had to get that in there. Yeah,
Yep.
same thing. You're like, what is he saying?
Yep. But yeah, like that Trey Smith, he does prophecy stuff, end time stuff, a lot of pre-flood, Exodus, ancient Sumerian type things, and just brings it all together. And that was Holland Fertilizer. I started watching his videos, and that's what opened it up to me. So
Cool.
All right, guys. Thanks for getting on tonight. Patrick's completely dark. James is getting dark.
It's a green screen, man.
Yeah.
Green screen went out.
We can put a background on Patrick now.
Yeah, it's good though. You can see me a lot better than you could have been.
Yeah, it looks good when you get dark.
like-
Your
yeah.
back porch must have a decent front light for you.
We got those lights on. Brandy turns all the lights on back here so I
Yeah.
can see when it starts getting dark.
But before you guys leave, go over to Patrick's YouTube channel, and also Zeke Outdoors is in the description too. So give those guys a subscribe and hit the subscribe button here.
Yep.
And then
And
in the
like it.
comments, let us know what else you'd like to hear us talk about, because this is all good stuff.
We'll come up with
it takes us
something.
a couple of years to get through this topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get to it in 2026. Oh man. I need to do more research on it. It's super interesting to me. And obviously I haven't scratched the surface.
Yeah. Well, that's
So-
what we're here for. We're Bible studying and doing it online.
That's right. That's right.
Hopefully everybody will enjoy it.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Leave a
See you
comment.
guys.
Hit
Thanks.
the subscribe button. Thanks, James. Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, man. See you, Zeke.
See you, Zeke. Bye, everybody.
Bye.